Eerily haunting true stories about remote abandoned locations rich in history. Come with us in our travels from state to state, if you dare.
Be the last time anybody sees us alive. I don't know where she has us, but we're gonna get fucking killed.
Hello?
Gina, there is a beehive over there. Do you see that in the hole?
Buckle up, Buttercup.
Welcome to 50 States of Madness.
Welcome to 50 States of Madness.
Hi.
Sorry, we're sharing a mic tonight. We have a guest. We have a wonderful interview tonight. So we only have 2 microphones. So this here, as you can see, is our wonderful guest, Mr. Craig Owens, author of Haunted by History, Volume 1.
I'm waving.
Yes, we.
He is a haunted historian, amongst other things, ghost researcher.
Yeah, I've been called many different things.
What do you prefer?
You know, I don't know. It's fine. I don't like necessarily just being called a photographer or a tour guide, or because I wear many different hats. So ghost researcher, I've been called that on TV. I've been called paranormal investigator. That kind of makes me cringe. But because it's being a paranormal investigator, you know, maybe a badge for some people, but it's kind of an embarrassing title for those that actually do real research.
Right.
In Ventura, in particular, I won't name names unless you want me to.
The Pierpont?
Unless you pay me $10.
Yeah. Is that the Pierpont we're talking about?
Well, we're talking about the Pierpont. We're talking about the Bella Maggiore. We're talking about the Glen Tavern Inn.
My family is from Ojai.
Okay.
So I'm familiar with that area.
And you may even know this individual because he's been around since, you know, the mission.
Okay.
Just kidding. He came a little bit after that, but he's been around a long time in the 1980s, and at least, and he's made quite a reputation for himself over time. But when I started doing research on the Pierpont Inn and the Glen Tavern and the Bella Maggiore, I was actually going to the Ventura County Museum to look at microfiche on the newspapers for these locations because the LA Times didn't really cover it adequately. And at first, the person that ran the library, the research library, he didn't even want to talk to me when he found out that I was a ghost guy.
Right.
Didn't want to even talk to me at all. And he went on this kind of, you can call it rant, not really a rant though, but he did express his feelings about a certain individual who has gone for years saying a bunch of stuff about different places, yet this historian has never once come into the Ventura County Research Library.
Interesting.
And he said, well, you know, I wonder where he gets his information from. So I deep dived into the newspaper gallery. Some newspapers were obsolete. They were just short-run rags, and then there were some major, you know, local newspapers. And what I was finding is he was popping up a lot in the newspapers, the local newspapers there. But it reveals right in the newspapers what he was doing. He was doing seances.
Oh my gosh.
And that's his historical research, seances.
Wow.
That's crazy.
It is crazy.
I
Another thing, you know, we're already going down a rabbit hole here.
Well, first of all, I want to let everybody know where we're at.
Yeah.
We are at the Aztec Hotel in Monrovia, California.
Yes, the wonderful 1920s Aztec Hotel. I'm pretty much its only historian now. Monrovia lost their historian earlier this year, their official historian.
Goodness, okay.
And so that just leaves me now. So I better get that book out.
Wow, you better. Yeah, no pressure, but
I know.
We're waiting for volume 2.
The historian was a wonderful guy. He actually came to one of my presentations for the Monrovia Historical Society on this hotel.
Oh, wow.
And I blew him away. I mean, he came up to me afterwards and introduced himself. And of course, I had been wanting to interview him
Yeah.
Yeah.
for a while too. So I was equally, you know, mesmerized by his presence. And but he said, you knew stuff that I didn't know about this
Wow.
place. And one of the stories that I had floated around, and I said, well, I've never been able to connect the dots here, but something's really fishy about an event that happened here. And he said, you're spot on. So he goes, I'm related to the person, the family that you're talking about.
Oh, my gosh.
And let me, I know your listeners are going to go, what
What's
is the story?
Yeah, back it up. What's the story?
Well, the Aztec Hotel is this funky, kitschy Mayan revival hotel that was built in, well, they started in 1924. They finished, most of it was built in 25. And it opened on September 1st, 1925. And it was a dud from the get-go. The city of Monrovia was a very conservative place. And somehow or another, it was this company was built to build this hotel, and it was made up of affluent Monrovians who had never had a hotel experience.
Right.
These were Chamber of Commerce people that just wanted a kitschy roadside hotel that would attract tourism and hopefully Hollywood movies, who had previously just bypassed Monrovia. Monrovia didn't have a great reputation. It was known as a speed trap.
Oh.
You know, through the early 1920s, and it was very agriculture. So people from LA traveling back and forth would go to Riverside, they'd go to Palm Springs, they'd go to everywhere else, but they would always just drive on through.
I was going to ask the road.
Monrovia.
Yeah, the road right here, was it a popular thoroughway? I don't know how to say it, like a popular road that went from LA to the Inland Empire, or
Not at that
Okay.
time. No, this was actually even before Route 66,
Okay.
which did run in front of the Aztec Hotel, but it wasn't until a couple of years after the Aztec was built. But there was always rumor, and there was always a lobbying pressure to turn what is now Foothill, which you can sometimes hear the motors passing by.
Yeah.
Foothill was just a thoroughfare that they wanted to turn into a scenic highway.
Okay.
It was not traveled on that. It wasn't a busy street at the time for people to travel, but it had the view of the mountains behind and
Right.
the foothills.
Yeah, it's
So
beautiful.
they thought
This
it was
area is really beautiful
and
out
that's
here.
why it did get the Route 66 designation for a while.
Got it.
Anyway, back to the Aztec. So it was built by committee,
Mm-hmm.
none of them knowing, you know, what they really wanted.
Yeah.
They wanted an indigenous hotel. That's one thing that they did all agree on. And originally it was supposed to be a Pueblo revival, I believe. It's either Hopi or Pueblo, but I believe it was Pueblo revival. And then none of them knew how to raise money to do it, so they made a deal with the devil, at least in their mind.
Yeah.
They found a company called the Hockenberry Corporation in Chicago, who made all kinds of promises. Sure, we'll help you select the land, we'll help you select everything. The architect will help you raise the money, but we make like 20 cents off of every dollar that you make, and then when you're done building this, we'll run it for you.
Oh.
So everyone in Monrovia, business-wise, seemed to be quite naive back then, and they went, "Oh, that sounds like a good deal.
Yeah.
We'll jump on board." So they signed this deal, and so Hockenberry goes to work, and they don't even have a location yet, but they do this really fast, almost offensive money drive using the Monrovia Daily News to get money
Okay.
to pay for funding this. And they wanted at least 200,000, you know, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And Hockenberry had found this eccentric British architect named Robert Stacey Judd, who had an office on Hollywood Boulevard at the time. And Robert Stacey Judd was very theatrical minded. And so they handed him the assignment to do a Pueblo. Well, he was watching what other architects were doing, and and there was this Mayan revival beginning to kind of percolate around here, and so he claims that some salesman came into his office one day with a bunch of old books from like the 1840s on the Mayan civilization, the pyramids, the hieroglyphs, or whatnot, and he bought these books, and he had this epiphany where, he wanted to do a Mayan revival, but he wanted it called the Aztec.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
And the reason why he wanted it called the Aztec was because he felt that Americans would, be more familiar with the word Aztec than Mayan.
Okay.
So, and that's your response?
Yeah,
Okay.
so
That's exactly what this company did, by committee. So he's just he's saying these ridiculous things to them, and they're like nodding their heads going, okay. We'll sign off on that. So they're going, well, but why Mayan or why Aztec? And they go, well, just think about it. The Egyptian revival is going wild, after finding King Tut. And so everyone's going into these ancient civilizations. They're all having a revival. But if we go with Mayan, it will be 100% American, and your folks would love that. You Monrovians would love that. 100%
Wow.
American. Made. That I'm not kidding. That's exactly what he
Wow.
sold them on. And so they're going, okay. And then they made additional promises. This will be built by 100% Monrovians. So this will really stimulate the economy, local economy.
Right.
So they're going, oh, okay. Well, it was still mostly an agricultural town of about 10,000 people. Most of them didn't give a hang about a 100-room tourist hotel because this was supposed to be massive.
Right.
Yeah.
The way it was originally designed to be. And so the Monrovia Daily Paper, they did just this horrible job. I mean, I really wish people could read this to, in order to learn how not to do a money raising. So they were lucky enough to raise about $130,000.
Oh, that's shocking. I wasn't thinking
Which
they'd be
wasn't-
able to raise that
It
much.
was really probably a little under that, 124,000, somewhere around there. And they got that. And most of these people were the ones that were part of the company anyway.
Yeah.
And so they turned it loose to Robert Stacy Judd with his Mayan revival design, which is all whimsy. There's nothing
Yeah.
really Mayan about it. It's his imagination.
Right.
So a lot of people have thought they found his initials throughout the friezes and the Mayan friezes, but it went over budget. They had, there was no way they could do a Mayan revival hotel on like $124,000.
Right, of course.
So they broke a lot of promises, which angered the original investors to begin with. So it went from a 100-room hotel down to a 44-room hotel.
So there's 44 rooms here.
Total 36 regular hotel rooms and like 8 apartments.
Okay.
And
I've been so backing up a little, I met you in May of 2018 when I was here for an investigation or whatever we want to call it. But
Mystic
it was
Museum.
it was a presentation that you put on, which was I mostly came just to hear you talk and speak on your book and everything. But we went for a tour of. I feel like we just kind of we met for your presentation, and then we were just kind of let loose to go wherever.
Yeah.
But most of the place was open from what I remember. I know.
I had parts of it open for just that.
Yeah.
For just that night. Yeah.
But I didn't know how many rooms there actually was.
Right. 36 regular rooms, 8 apartments. So let's get back to the story that I was initially going to tell. That's the
Oh
background.
yes,
there you
yes,
go.
because I'm sure
That's the
people are
background.
like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god."
Yeah.
Okay, so the
See,
story.
There are so many rabbit holes, and I'm really bad about following through them all. So the hotel opens on September 1st, 1925, and like I had said earlier, it was a dud. It didn't fill up. People were looking at it like it's an oddity. There was a major backlash against by the town itself, Monrovia, against this hotel. Monrovia was an ultra-conservative Republican place. Still kind of is, but it was definitely so then.
Right.
And Robert Stacy Judd did some things that were, offensive to them. One was he put murals throughout the building, and the mural that's right outside the ladies' lounge is the god of lust.
Oh, okay.
And then another mural, which I actually found a piece of it, not a literal piece, but a picture of it, because it's long gone.
Okay.
But when people walked into the Aztec in 1925, they had to pass a mural of the god and goddess of death greeting them.
Oh, my God.
And they did have demons, and they did have a man falling into the netherworld between the god and goddess of death.
Wow.
So that was intentional.
It was intentional.
Okay.
He had fun. Robert Stacy Judd had fun.
And we'll post pictures throughout this of all this stuff.
It got painted over really quick once the hotel failed for the first time. But you can imagine, this was covered in the newspapers in the day, so people were reading this. It got terrible reviews. One of the major architectural review magazines said, well, this is proof that the Mayan revival is absolutely non-functional in today's standard. You know, it was saying things like that. Now, what's funny is you go online and you research Aztec Hotel. It says, it was a big hit. The critics loved it. And it wasn't. There were a few reviewers that did like it. It got mixed to negative reviews.
Right.
Okay.
You know, it was kind of like an Ishtar of hotels,
okay.
you know. That redeemed itself later because it was so different. But people didn't understand it at the time.
Yeah.
The Chamber of Commerce had a major backlash, people just dropping out and refusing to renew their membership, partly based on this Aztec Hotel. It was hemorrhaging money. Now, the person that was in charge was a guy named Price, was his last name. And he was a very popular socialite. He had invested in real estate. He had married. He had worked at a YMCA in L.A., and he had met a very wealthy family and married into that family. And he had owned a few hotels, but he wasn't hands-on. He was an investor.
Yeah.
So he wasn't a manager or anything. But he was elected to be president, okay? So almost immediately, within months of this place opening, rumors started circulating that liens were being filed against the owners. They didn't think to put any kind of a neon signage on the hotel roof, so it was real pitch black at night, and people didn't know how to even find this place. And there were just a lot of problems. It had gone over budget, and people were looking at it as a piece of art, but who wants to spend the night in a piece of art in 1925? So it lost a lot of money. The rumors were spreading that they were in debt. Price was trying to allay fears of the investors by saying, oh, no, we just haven't collected all of our money from our fund drive for the hotel. But when it's in place, we'll have everything paid. Well, guess what? It just got worse. And then in 1926, by May or so, they held an emergency meeting of investors here, and Price and some of the other elected officers finally confessed that the rumors are true. The contractor had filed a lien on the building. They didn't have the money to pay for anything. And the bank was threatening to foreclose on their debt, their loan. The investors, I'm sure there were fist fights. There were some kind of hints that happened in this building, even in the mid-20s, in its early days, fist fights in the building. But they replaced Price, and they replaced all these other people. Now, here's where it gets weird, is that I started noticing not long after Price is replaced, they put a new person in charge. They do this emergency fundraising, and they actually raise enough money, so they think, to get the banks off their back. But people were now putting all their savings just to protect their initial investment.
Right.
So they were exhausted. And so after everyone's patting themselves on the back, Price mysteriously dies
Oh.
in a fire in his garage. And they suspect arson, but no inquest.
Interesting.
There was no inquest, no investigation into it. What I also thought was odd was that at Price's funeral, absolutely no one spoke about the man's character. What they did instead is publish the preacher's sermon, which was about Jesus and David and all these biblical figures, nothing about him, the man.
Wow.
And I thought,
Interesting.
how can you go from being a star
Yeah.
attraction of your town, one of the big muckety mucks,
And nobody
to
has anything
no
to
one
say about
wanting-
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no one wanting to say anything about him at all. So I started digging a little bit deeper, and I saw that, oh, he's suddenly dropping out of the country club. He's suddenly dropping out of the Chamber of Commerce. This is following, his being fired and replaced from this company, the Aztec Hotel.
Oh.
So when I was addressing the Historical Society, I brought that up and I just said, this is really suspicious. How can you say that someone died from arson fire in the garage? The chief of police is saying this, but there's no inquest
Right.
into the charred remains. The story makes no real sense. The story that was the story that was published in the paper says that literally that he woke up one night, his barn was on fire. It was a 2-story barn. He runs out to the barn because he had some valuable automobiles that he was trying to save, and the fire extinguisher on the bottom floor did not work. So he climbed the stairs to the second floor to get another fire extinguisher. While going down the stairs are on fire and they collapsed and he's trapped. Now his son and someone else drags him out of the fire and he apparently is still alive. But does he talk to the police? Does he talk to the fire department? No. He talks to his insurance person and his son. And then they supposedly take him to the hospital where he dies from his injuries
Okay.
in a hospital.
Did they ever find his body? Is that where we're getting at? Is his body ever found?
Well, here's
Like it-
here's the part that got filled in by the Monrovia historian. His name is Stephen Baker, rest his soul. Really great guy. He got excited when I started telling that story because that's one of the stories he knew, but he didn't share with anybody.
Oh, okay.
So he pulled me aside and he said, "You're onto it. You guessed right. There's something fishy about it," because he's a member of that family, a descendant of that family.
Right.
Said Price had committed suicide, and his family had moved his body into the garage and set it on fire in order to collect the insurance.
Okay.
My gosh.
I thought there was something, maybe he fled the country and now he's got descendants. Okay, but it's
It goes by a different
I was
name.
thinking goes
But
by
it never made the newspaper. That's why there was no inquest.
Inquest.
That's why no one spoke in his behalf. It was all just push under the rug.
Yeah.
That's a
Wow.
skeleton in the closet. But that's the first major tragedy associated with this hotel. And it's
Wow.
had a bad run ever since, But I always felt bad. And part of me wonders, I know that Price was a major investor in the Aztec Hotel. Were they trying to collect on the money that they had lost on the hotel? Because what ended up happening is after they did this bond drive, this so-called successful bond drive, it didn't work. They either lied to the bank or the money didn't quite come through. The bank went after them again within months. They were too exhausted and too broke to try to save this hotel. So the bank took it over. Everyone that had initially invested their monies into this building lost. They lost it all. One of their major board members, a guy named Lincoln Bacchus, he was an attorney, just had a business a couple of blocks down, a block or two down. He dies from a heart attack not too terribly long after the bank took it over. I think it just killed a lot of people's
Right.
health.
Yeah.
The stress, it took a lot of people's life savings away. And so there was some bad juju with this place. Oh,
Right.
and they really, a lot of the investors really despised Robert Stacy Judd. And once they realized that no one was really coming here,
Right.
not at the numbers that they needed to even pay back the loan.
Of course.
cover the
Sustainable.
loan.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one newspaper report in 1926 where they're saying, "Oh, we're at 45% occupancy. This is great. It's a new record." And
Oh,
it's
wow.
44 units at 45%,
45%.
or even 55%
Yeah, that's not
occupancy is
a lot.
horrible.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
horrible. You're not going to make any money
No.
that way.
No.
So that's what happened, and that was the rocky road that set this place, this hotel, the history of it going. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's had a very rough existence. It's a miracle that it's still standing,
Yeah.
but it got off to a inauspicious start. And when it did finally sell, the bank finally sold it like in 27, 28. And it did well up until the Great Depression.
Okay.
Right.
In
Okay.
2930. Then it started going down. 1932 it closed. Right after the Los Angeles Summer Olympics, they were hanging on by a thread, hoping they'd get some income from people traveling
Yeah.
to Los Angeles for the Summer Olympics. But I mean, almost immediately after the Summer Olympics wrapped, this hotel closed, and it remained closed until 1936, 1937.
Oh, okay.
When a woman bought it. And there's a reason why she bought it. She bought it because of the horse racing going on at Santa Anita Park.
Okay.
This was the closest nice hotel to that park. It's a little over a mile or close to
Yeah.
2 miles
That's
away.
pretty close.
And so, and by that time, Prohibition was over.
Mm-hmm.
So you could actually get a legal cocktail.
Right.
So around 1936, a woman named Nellie Jameson bought this place, and she bought it to open it up to appeal to the horse racing crowd at Santa Anita Park. So all of the old furnishings, the original Mayan-inspired furnishing that the original, I think it's the Brooks Brothers, or I forgot what they're called, but they were based out of L.A. All of that had been removed by the bank and had put in other hotels.
Oh, wow.
It's all lost
Oh.
Oh my gosh.
after it closed in 1932. So Nella Jameson made a deal with the bank. The bank did something kind of unusual. When they sold her, it was like lease to own.
Mm-hmm.
She had 10 years, I think, to pay it off and until she would own it.
Right.
They wouldn't let her paint over the murals, oddly enough.
Oh.
Why?
That was just a requirement that the bank made.
Very interesting.
I know. So she
Because they were so offensive.
Only a
So it's
couple of
just
them
a couple
are.
of them. Okay.
only a
So-
couple of them, and I'm not sure that heaven
were
and
still
hell
there.
was included in the bargaining. thing.
Right.
But there's like the god of good feast and harvest.
At
and
what
stuff
point
like
was that one covered?
That is a mystery.
Oh, you don't know.
I
Okay.
don't
But
know.
you do have a picture of it?
Yes,
Okay.
a partial picture. Now, there were no photos that I know of in existence that actually have that mural.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
But there was one publication that had. There once was a photo somewhere because someone took that photo and
Yeah.
put it in a newspaper,
Right.
and it was really in awful shape when I came across it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But I restored it as best as I could,
Oh, interesting.
and so one of these days, I'm friendly with the owners. I've been kind of nudging, saying, one of these days, let's put this mural back somewhere.
Yeah.
Let's put it in the basement where everyone gets scared
Okay.
anyway.
Imagine. Yeah, I've been in that basement,
got
and
it
let me
dead.
tell you.
Yeah. Mural. But yeah, it did, during its 1920s, 1930s period, it probably did have a speakeasy. I mean, people were saying that for years, and this isn't made up by a psychic. It's
Where
not
do you
made
think
up
that it
for a
was?
seance. It's funny because it's in the basement, if they
Okay.
did. But I'm
Okay.
not sure, because the restaurants had shut down. All the social groups like the Elks and the Misfits and the Rotary Club. Well, not the Misfits, but
No.
the University Club. All these social
Yeah.
groups. They all moved to another place because they want food.
Right.
So this place didn't even have like a proper manager. So in order to keep it even open, that's when I think that they operated the speakeasy. And I say this because the speakeasies only exist when they tend to exist in buildings that don't make the news anymore.
Right.
And by 1931, the Aztec was not making the news
Right.
Yeah.
anymore. I believe it didn't have a speakeasy when it first opened in 1925 because everyone was arguing. All the investors were fighting with one another, and you had some major Bible thumpers as part of the investors, so they're absolutely going to balk
Of course.
Yes.
at a speakeasy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that those arguments did take place. Anything to get the money back. Anything to get the money back.
Yeah.
You know, let's serve alcohol, and I just think that when you have a company that's being run and operated by committee,
Yeah.
you're not going to get a lot of agreement on anything.
Right.
And that had a lot to do with why it failed,
Yeah.
especially if it's people that don't have a lot of hotel experience.
Right. Right.
So they're kind of like, what did we get into?
Yeah.
The tourists weren't coming. Oh, they'll come in and take a look and go, oh, that's interesting. Now let's go someplace where we can get a good night's rest.
Yeah.
While we're here, you know?
Right.
So that was what was going on. So when Nellie Jameson bought it, she repainted the upper floors. Each in the 1920s, this is one of the reasons why it failed, in my opinion, is that Robert Stacey Judd just went nuts, and no one was there to like curtail him.
Okay.
And so each of the 36 rooms were painted a different color.
Oh,
Oh.
So and I
Well, there
think
were
they were
36
probably
different
along,
colors.
they were described as black, mottled pink, Ming red. So basically, the idea was if you came in to get a room, so well, the front desk person would go, well, what's your favorite color? Yellow. Well, we have a yellow room.
Oh my God.
So yeah, it was like the Madonna Inn,
Right, right.
1925,
Yes, yes.
right? And so they would put them up in the yellow room, but all these rooms were like very bright or very dark colors.
Okay.
And I actually think, knowing Stacey Judd, he probably stayed close to the Mayan colors, which weren't that many. I think there were 6 or 7 basic colors that they used, and it probably repeated.
Right.
But there was a compromise made at some point because those 8 apartments were not painted a different color.
Oh,
They were
okay.
Painted, that was the compromise. They were just kept Spanish Revival, off-white
Okay.
paint, nothing really crazy. But
Okay, I
everything
have a
else was
question.
crazy.
So, those you say they're apartments. Is this something that like people rented as like an
Yeah.
apartment like today?
There was a sanitarium in Monrovia at the time called the Pottinger Sanitarium.
Okay.
It's actually where silent film actress Mabel Normand died.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
And Cecil B. DeMille had some of his employees with problems.
Okay.
He would house them there. The
Interesting.
Pottingers were investors in the Aztec Hotel, and they actually were, one of the Pottingers succeeded Price as president.
Oh, very
After
interesting.
Price got kicked out. So what they were hoping for, and what the Aztec was hoping for, what the whole company was hoping for, were people coming and staying for extended periods
Okay.
of time. People from the East, family members.
So it
who
was like
had-
an extended stay kind of
right.
situation.
People
Okay.
who had family members or loved ones at the sanitarium. The
Got it.
sanitarium had a few spaces for them to stay, but this would be an in-town hotel that wasn't far.
Where did you say that was?
It was up Myrtle.
But no,
and then
in
it
the
was-
city. It was
yeah,
in
it was just outside of the city limits. Yeah,
Was it
interesting.
still-
probably
Okay.
about a mile.
I
mile and a half
visited
away.
Rock Haven.
Oh yeah.
sanitarium. But I've never heard of that one before.
Is that
Pottinger was
still-
big and huge. No, it went away
It went-
completely.
I,
Housing development now.
Sorry, we still have to keep sharing a mic. I was going to ask, too, well, I maybe make a statement. I'm really surprised that they didn't tear this hotel down. Like, it's still standing here based on...
Well, I'll tell you
Okay.
why.
Yes.
I actually I figured it out why it still stayed.
okay.
A lot of buildings, you'll find even haunted buildings and historic buildings, they survive through failure. It just too much money to tear them down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to buy it and redevelop the property. Now, had this building been built on Huntington Drive, which is also in Monrovia, it would have been torn down because that is the real estate. That's more
where the
valuable real estate
Right.
there. And so a lot of the old buildings have been replaced and with Toys R Us, and
Yeah.
then Toys R Us goes out of business and something else
Right.
takes over, and but not Foothill. But when it sold in 37 and reopened, it did really well up until the 40s. Then when World War II broke out, they shut down, the military shut down Santa Anita Park and turned it into a Japanese internment camp.
Wow.
So that killed the racing crowd, and then the Aztec got affected by it. By 1945, prostitutes were working out of the hotel. And it's still owned by Nellie Jameson, who's getting up in
Wow.
years. She did eventually buy it. And what a lot of people don't realize is that it was a family-run business up until the 70s. It was...
Wow.
They all had different names, but they were the sons took over from the mom, and
Oh, wow. So her family owned it till the 70s.
yeah.
And then now did it stay open that whole time until you said 2012?
Yeah, I believe it stayed open, but it went really downhill. At one point, the military forbade any of their servicemen to come to the Aztec until they did something about the way they conducted business, if you know what I mean.
Wow.
And I had always heard that was a rumor. I thought it might be urban legend, but I actually did find the proof of that.
Wow.
So it was closed down for almost a year. 1946, they lifted the ban, but they were also, the government, local government was also fining, I should say state government was fining the Aztec for gouging on liquor prices during the war years. They were just doing anything they could to stay going. After World War II, with a lot of buildings, especially buildings built in the 20s and earlier, there was a big shift in public tastes. New cynicism took over. Nobody wanted the old anymore. We wanted new things. We wanted air conditioning. We wanted swimming pools. None of this shared bathroom stuff, even though the Aztec
Is
always
it
had
hostel style
bathrooms.
or no?
do you
Some
mean?
of do
No,
they have
No, this one was lucky enough that it was forward thinking enough where everyone had a bathroom
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
when they built this. And so by the 50s, this place had gone, it's film noir. I mean, really, I think the paranormal stuff, most of the stuff here is from the 40s and 50s, because it really became like a film noir, seedy,
Can you
Skid
tell us
Row
some
kind of
stories?
stuff. Huh?
Can you tell us like a few stories? Or I know there's one room in particular here that is
Room 120 being haunted.
Yeah.
Yeah, the story of Room 120 it's mostly urban legend, what you'll find online. And I've seen people post on social media, and it's almost 100% wrong. It's like, why don't you just go on one of my tours when actually I don't have them anymore, but when I did,
Yes.
you should have gone. You would have heard the whole story, because that's what prompted me to even look into this hotel's history, is I wanted to find proof of anything and everything. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning of our conversation. It's finding out when the ghost stories started and who started them.
Yeah.
That is the smoking gun. And that's the smoking gun with this Room 120. Now, I'll preface this by saying I've stayed in Room 120 many times, and there is paranormal activity there. It's just, I think, been miscategorized.
okay.
I could be wrong, but it just seems like there's something else from a later era. But as the story goes, as the urban legend goes, I should point out, there was a story of a woman that possibly worked as a prostitute in the 1920s, who met someone in the basement, took him up to room 120. They got into a fight over the price of her services. He bashed her head against a steam radiator and left her to die. There is another variation of the story that's actually a little bit older, which makes even less sense. At least that one made sense. It's somewhat tied to some kind of history. The other one is about a newlywed couple that were there celebrating on their honeymoon, and the sex got a little bit too wild, and she fell and hit her head on the steam heater and died.
Yeah, I think that's the one that I heard.
That makes no sense
Yeah.
at all. And of course, when I first came here, I didn't know any better, so I was telling this story like everyone else. But then people were asking me, well, do we know anything? And I said, that's a good question. I should look into that. So I started looking into that, and there's nothing. How that story started, especially the Razzle Dazzle name.
Razzle Dazzle, that's what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the name of the ghost.
Razzle Dazzle, yeah.
This actually started in the very late 90s, and it was a LA Times reporter named Cecilia Rasmussen, who usually deep dives into history archives and does some good writing. But when she doesn't have time to do it, or if there's just not enough info, a lot of these reporters will do the worst thing possible. They will consult a psychic.
Oh.
And that's what she did. She got a psychic from local here, and two psychics actually, and brought them here, and they just filled in the blanks on the history. And so there's one psychic from like Azusa, I want to say her name was Cecilia. She's no longer with us, but she came up with the name Razzle Dazzle and came up with the prostitute that died by hitting her head on a radiator, and there was like a black bookkeeper or black piano player that was playing in the basement, the ghost of one, mind you. So she came up with several ghosts, but the one in room 120 being Razzle Dazzle, that's the one that kind of went viral and got repeated a lot.
Sounds like an ice cream flavor.
Yeah, and so
Is there any history of that you have found of something that happened in that room, or there's just paranormal activity?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
Oh, okay.
There is one odd thing I'd like to say. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not completely anti-psychic, so I don't want people to think, oh, there he goes off on his nut again.
No.
Psychics are largely responsible for a lot of bad information.
Right.
And so whenever I hear that a psychic's involved, whether it's with the Cecil Hotel or whatever, I just roll my eyes and go, here we go again.
Yeah,
It's
I agree.
another month of research finding nothing to corroborate their claims.
Correct.
So, or in some cases, finding out the exact opposite and just showing that they aren't psychic.
Right.
Well, in this particular case, it's not quite like that. What I found interesting about it, it's a good story, so let me get right to it. I was looking for Razzle Dazzle. I was looking for any woman that died between 1928 and 1932, because that's what all the books were saying, that's what all the media was saying, that's what everyone was saying. I don't think there were any deaths in that room. I could be wrong. It was very much in the public eye locally. It was a small town, a lot of gossips. I don't think they could hide a death from that period of time.
Right.
But I also didn't think it had the, in between 25 and 27, it didn't even have enough business to have a death. In my opinion.
Right.
So most deaths happen once a business takes off, like a hotel business takes off. And it's just sheer numbers. The
Right.
more people you have, the greater the chance you're going to have a death there. Okay. What happened in 1927 was that there was a group called the Elks. Everyone's heard of Elks. Yes. Well, the Elks chapter in Monrovia got a new piece of land kind of given to them to build a new clubhouse, and it just happened to be a block away from the Aztec Hotel. So they abandoned their old building And so they would meet here on occasion while their clubhouse was being built a block away. What I did find interesting, and something that the psychic would not know anything about, is that once a month they would have private card games, and those private card games were called razzle dazzles.
Interesting.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this does open the door for a whole new, conversation. It's not a woman named Razzle Dazzle, but
Right,
maybe
but
there
it's
is
something, yeah.
maybe there's something lingering behind that's somehow connected to a Razzle Dazzle card game. And this kind of makes sense too, because when I was in the basement doing a paranormal investigation back in 2009, a private one, I know nothing about cards. I don't gamble at all, but in the boiler room, we caught a very deep male voice saying one set of deuces.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
And we didn't hear it at the time. It was only
Yeah.
3 of males down there. And it took me a while listening to that over and over again to figure out what was being said. But once I figured out, it sounds like one set of deuces. What does that mean? So I looked it up and went, oh, that's an opening for a poker hand.
Yeah.
And then now that I figured out what it is, I can't unhear it.
Right,
and when
right.
I play it to other people and they hear one set of deuces, they can't unhear it either. It is what was being said, and it's clear once you hear it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a flesh and blood person speaking.
Right.
It's not wispy and
Yeah.
whispery
Yes.
and it's a real deep voice. It just happens to be speaking over someone that is in the distance.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But it's loud enough where you hear it at the same time.
Yes.
I've picked up women's voices in the basement too. And
Have there been any deaths here that
yes, as far as I know, I've come across 11.
Okay.
deaths here?
Yeah, and I think that may be
Natural causes or
A lot of them are.
okay.
A lot of them are. I will say one thing, that when you were on the tour event, I had learned something since then.
Okay.
When I would lead tours, and we would go from the lobby up to the second floor,
Uh-huh.
that long length of the second floor.
Yes.
Oftentimes people would just, and it was always kind of funny. I watched them and they just like stop in their tracks and their eyes get big as saucers. And I go, what's wrong? I said, the energy here is just like crazy. Now, not everybody felt that. Not every tour felt that. But there were some where it was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And you can kind of feel it. I mean, I've been on that hallway at all times of day and night for years. And sometimes I can feel it really thick too. What I found out, there was a death in that hallway in 1950. And it was a
Oh,
male
interesting.
that had checked out of a veterans hospital on Sawtell, checked in here. Not long after midnight, they found him dead within a couple of hours in the hallway. And I don't know if it's suicide.
Yeah.
I don't know how he died. It's suspicious, though,
Yes.
Yeah.
for someone to check out of a
And this was in 1950?
1950.
Interesting.
So the first death started getting recorded in around 41, 42. And then the deaths started happening through the 50s, sometime in the 60s. This building has had quite a few fires. And it also became a residential hotel in the 60s, so you had a lot of seniors living here. And
Really? Oh, I did
some
not
of them
know
would
that.
have.
Okay.
There was a case of a person that had a stroke in the lobby, and even though he died in a hospital, I mean, this was his place of residence. This would be
Right.
where his emotional attachment would be.
Right.
There was a woman, an elderly woman, that died from burns in a fire in her room at the Aztec. Now, she didn't die from the fire in her room. She died in a hospital. But, there could be these things
Yeah.
lingering around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last
Interesting.
person who died here, I actually knew. And it was it was someone I knew pretty well. And he got out of his car in the parking lot and his heart stopped.
Oh my
And
goodness.
he fell, broke his neck.
Oh
And
my
this was a week. He had lived in the hotel and worked in the hotel for years. And this happened a week to the day of him seeing for the very first time
Oh my God.
a ghostly thing in the lobby.
Wow.
Stop.
Because he had asked me what I thought of it. And I told him it was like a shadow. He described it. He described it as a bat, a big bat that flew in from the bar where we're sitting. There was a window at one point. I actually told the story to the owners, and I suggested they close up the window into
Yeah.
the lobby, and they did.
Oh wow.
But there was an illegal window that had been built in the 80s. They actually destroyed a mural in order to build a window
How
that looked
sad.
in from the Brass Elephant Bar, which is what it was called in the 80s, into the lobby. Well, one night about 3, 4 in the morning, John, the person I'm referring to, he was working the front desk doing the graveyard shift, and he saw this black bat glide about 5 feet off the floor through that window, heading straight towards him at the registration desk. And then just right before it got to the registration desk, it then suddenly swooped downward and disappeared on the other side of the desk. Thinking that it was a bat, he went around the corner to take a look, expecting to see a stunned animal. There was nothing there. And I said, well, okay, first of all, was it flying like a bat? Was it
Yeah.
flapping its wings? Was it flying kind of erratic? He said, no, it was gliding. He had said, used the term gliding.
Right.
And I said, well, bats don't glide.
Yeah.
You know, they flap
They
all
fly,
around.
yeah.
They're constantly moving.
Yes.
And I said, well, I've heard of people seeing shadow figures shaped like stingrays. Not at the Aztec, but I've heard about it in other
Right.
places. I said, could it have been a stingray that you saw, or shape? You're saying gliding. Stingrays glide, you know, through the water.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, it was gliding like that. It could have been that. And I said, well, I said, you know, the best advice I gave him, I kind of laughed, but it's so pathetic. Because I don't know the answers to these things. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not an no one's a paranormal expert. You can be a historian, which is probably
Of course.
the best thing you can be.
Yeah.
Since you can't,
Yes.
if you can't be a paranormal expert, be a historian. That's as close as you'll ever get. So I just advised him to go to his doctor and get a checkup. And you know, I find it odd if it were a hallucination of some kind. Hallucinations, I'm not a medical scientist or psychologist, but I don't really hear too many stories of hallucinations ducking out of sight.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
But I suppose it can or
Yeah.
could, because there's certainly people on hallucinogenics that think something's peeking around the corner.
Of course.
them.
Yeah.
Of course.
But for something to come right at him and then swoop down is another thing. But it creeped me out because John and I had long conversations for a year. I knew all about, you know, not all about him, but I knew enough stuff where we were friends.
Yeah.
I knew what he was working on, what his projects were, and I knew his mindset. I knew that, you know, he was very together. He was in his
Yeah.
70s. And he was very bright. So he was open-minded to the paranormal, but he said that in all the years he had lived there, nothing had ever happened.
Right.
So for this to happen a week to the day
Yeah. That,
of his death
Interesting.
is another thing. And then he was on life support. By the time the ambulance came, they saved the body, but the mind was dead. And they kept him on life support for a week while they notified the family to find out what to do with him.
What to do, yeah.
But he's in a vegetative state. And the family did meet, and they agreed to pull him off of life support on a Sunday, I believe. And a week to the day of his death, which is a week to the day of him seeing this, he dies
Wow.
wow.
right before they pull the
Oh,
body dies right before they pull him off of life support.
Interesting. And when was this? What year was this?
2009,
Oh goodness.
November
okay.
2009.
Wow. That's a crazy story.
Well, I stopped doing all paranormal stuff at that point.
Yeah.
There was the morale here was horrible.
Yeah.
As far as all-time low.
I'm sure.
He was very much loved. And some kids that knew him very well started trying, well, they told me, kind of indirectly through other people were telling me that what these kids were telling them too. They were teenagers, but they thought that they were seeing him inside the building because he always wore a red jacket.
In here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that they'd see him at the end of the hallway just walking around the corner. And then they told me one story about how they were in this building, this space, the bar.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, we're in the bar area for.
and there was the
anybody who's
Mayan
watching.
bar. And there was a box that they just kind of kicked and slid out of the way, and then the box supposedly slid right back to where they were, and so they ran out of the bar. But this was happening during the time that they thought John was haunting this place. I've since investigated this place. They don't really allow investigations too often, but they have allowed me a few times to look into it, and
Yeah.
I've been here plenty of times.
Yeah.
I don't get the sense that John's here. John's never reached out to me. I've gotten nothing to indicate that he is here.
Yeah.
But there's definitely something here.
Yeah.
So you believe this is this?
Oh, absolutely. I've had
Haunted.
I've had enough things happen here. In fact, I think, right after you did the thing with the Mystic Museum,
Mm-hmm.
I decided I would, because of the demand, I would do some paranormal investigations.
Uh huh.
So it was that same year. It was in August, though.
Mm-hmm.
It was my birthday, actually. I did one.
Oh,
And
what
then
day?
after
When's your birthday?
August
12th.
Oh,
5th.
she's fifth.
Another Leo.
Yeah, Leo.
Yeah, I was here Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah. So suddenly they told me, we don't want to do any more investigations. I said, okay, that's fine. I've always been okay with it all. But then I found out, like a couple of months later, that I think something happened after one of the investigations. There's a light in one of the new kitchens, and it's a neon light that hangs from the ceiling about 5 feet.
Mm-hmm.
It started swinging by itself.
Well, it's funny because when we got
And it
here,
cooked.
when we walked in, the chandelier was swinging back and forth. And
Which one?
What is the gentleman's name that was here?
Yeah, Simon.
Is that his name, Simon?
One that let us in.
No.
No.
Ken?
The gentleman who
Ken.
lives here,
Well, Simon. Well, Ken.
Ken.
The
The younger one.
the younger one. He looked up and he's like, "Why is that swinging?" And it was the only one that was.
Okay, you just saw something that's unusual.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
You should have
and
told me about that. That would.
I recorded.
we recorded
record
it.
it?
Yeah.
I recorded it. I actually, he even told me, he said, take out your video camera and
Yeah.
record that. He goes, that never happens. And I
Yeah.
actually showed the other chandeliers that were just
It
completely
happens-
still. Just that one was moving.
When I'm here, sometimes things happen. The ghosts know me, I guess. I don't know, but a cook quit when he first saw that, and then just last year when I was doing tours, just historic tours, but I would, talk about the ghosts. At the end of the tour, about 10:30, 11 at night, the cook pulls me in and shows me, and
It was doing
that
it.
light is doing it again. And they said it's never done it since then.
Wow. That's why I always say when we come,
Wait,
I
are
don't
you talking about the light we just saw?
know the light in
No,
the
I'll
kitchen,
show
the
you
neon
the
light.
ki-
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll show you the kitchen light a
Yeah.
little bit later. Yeah.
That's why I always say when I come on these, I don't look for it.
Yeah.
I don't want to see it. I don't want to find it. And like I said, we go up to these places, but for some reason, it finds us. Like we have a story at every single place. It's not something we intentionally go to look for. We go to find. But like you said right there, I didn't even think to pull out my camera because I'm thinking, oh, it must be the wind. Oh, and the guy's looking at me like, that chandelier's heavy. Like, look at the other ones. Nothing else is moving. Just that one that was right above our head.
And it was moving.
It was moving. He goes,
I
take
wanna
out your
see it.
camera.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
definitely.
have it for you.
Well, back to 120, I
Yes.
stayed there plenty of times, and I've actually picked up musical notes.
Oh,
And I've picked up
interesting.
musical notes almost identical in the basement. So the cocktail lounge in the 30s and 40s was, I believe, directly underneath room 120. That's why I think it's maybe from a different
got
era.
it. Got it.
Like I said, there's anytime there's random paranormal, it seems to be, if you know your history really well, there are clues that indicate what era it may be from.
Right, right.
Instead of just thinking it's random, there's usually a reason for it. We just don't understand it.
The reason why Gina was so excited also to bring you on is because I wanted to just touch a little bit on the Cecil Hotel and also on your book, on the different hotels that you cover in that book, because it's fascinating.
Okay,
Alright, so
terrific.
yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit about? I know you were just on the CW on that show. That was fascinating, and
Mysteries Decoded, yeah.
I really want your pin that you were wearing on your jacket.
Oh, okay. That was gifted to me by someone who follows me on Instagram. I think I could send you a link where you can buy it.
Absolutely.
She's got a store on Etsy.
It was beautiful. It was a Cecil Hotel pin.
I've written her saying I'd like to buy more,
Yes.
but she never wrote me back. So it's kind of like I think she expected it to like fly off the shelves,
Right.
but you got to promote. I mean, that's the one thing I learned about my book is, books don't sell themselves. No product sells themselves.
Yeah.
You have to constantly promote it.
Oh,
But
yes.
yeah, I love that
would,
pen.
I would
I love
love
that
it. Yeah,
pen.
I spotted that thing right away. I was like, oh, I need one of those.
Yeah. I agree.
I need
No,
to add
wanted-
that to
I
my
wanted
pin
to-
collection.
I wanted to buy some and then sell them, at my events. I think
Oh,
that would have
absolutely.
been great.
Yeah.
But well.
So
if
you
you're
were
listening-
on the CW.
Yeah.
What is it called? Mysteries
Mysteries Decoded.
Decoded. Okay. I keep thinking Unsolved Mysteries. I did because I didn't.
It's trying to be that. It's a good show, I guess. I mean, I don't really watch paranormal shows that much, but
I don't
reason-
either.
And I turned down a lot of them. There's some shows I just absolutely won't do.
Right.
And so I'm nice about it, but it's like, no, I've worked too hard to tell the truth, to find the truth and tell the truth, to have someone, cash in on urban legends and then make
Of
me
course.
look like a fool.
Of course.
And so Mysteries Decoded, they wanted someone that knew the history of the Cecil, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted someone to take kind of a skeptical, very hard, almost cold look at it. Because they wouldn't tell me who they had, but they said that they already had people that, were firm believers, had all kinds of wild experiences and whatnot. I did mention a few names, and I said, I hope they're not on the show. And they said, oh, well, we know who you're talking about. Well, turns out they're on the show.
They're on the show.
But, or otherwise I would have said no,
Right.
because I just don't want to be around, I don't want to be around certain people. I don't want to be
Associated,
attached to them whatsoever.
Yeah.
What they're doing is exactly the opposite of what I stand for.
Right.
But so I agreed to do it, and it was a lot of fun. And Jennifer Marshall had to have thanked me like 5, 6, 7 times for being on the show and saying what needed to be said.
Right.
But one of the first things that I said, and I said this in the opening interview when they first contacted me. I said this to the location. I said this to the executive producer. I said this to Jennifer. I said this to the special guest star, that the Black Dahlia was never last seen at the Cecil. And the only reason why I'm even agreeing to do this is so that I get a chance to say that, because no show has ever done that before.
Was it on? Did that part air?
It did.
It did?
They went ahead and put it in at the beginning.
Oh, okay. Because I
But then
watched
they dropped it. But then they dropped
Okay,
it.
because I watched it. I watched the whole thing, and I was like, it didn't say that in there.
In the beginning, I forgot her name, but it's the reporter from Texas.
Okay.
Brought out her case file, and we're sliding these pictures, and the Black Dahlia's picture slid out and went across, and they said she's explaining to Jennifer that she was last seen at the Cecil, and Jennifer's just kind of nodding, and but it was never brought up again.
Okay.
And maybe I'd like to think that I had something to do with why it was never brought up again, because they actually had someone speak on that show who was the one that brought that up.
Oh,
Resurrected that urban legend for KCET,
interesting.
a respectable news agency.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, when I started seeing, these kind of paranormal, I call them supervillains, but when they start popping up, I'm going, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what's going to happen next? Have
Yeah.
I been sandbagged?
Yeah.
But actually, no, it turned out okay. I mean,
Yeah, it was good.
They
I
did edit
enjoyed
me
it.
a little bit out of context. I never said that it was evil. I was addressing other people's saying that it was evil. I was saying, well, some people could say it's evil. Somehow or another, it got edited to where I'm saying it's evil. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
my point is that I was actually trying to make is that the Cecil Hotel, its history is dark.
It is.
But it's in keeping, and it's not any darker than a lot of buildings along Skid Row.
Of course.
And that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
It's not, for instance, they were trying to get me to answer the question, did Robert Ramirez stay at the Cecil?
Oh, Richard
because
Ramirez.
Richard. So I told
I
you
know you
earlier,
did.
I have a mental block against
Yeah,
serial killer
yeah.
names.
Say that.
Yeah.
I can't say Jack Underweger or
Unterweger,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a mental block.
Yeah.
I just don't like
Get it.
talking
I get
about
it.
them.
I get it.
But anyway, Ramirez, I can remember Ramirez long enough to get through this interview. So Ramirez, they were trying to get me to comment because some people were claiming that the reason why he picked the Cecil was because it was so evil and because he was evil. And I was telling them, I said, and of course they're not going to, they were saying, no, don't say that. We want to focus on the Cecil. But my answer that didn't make the final cut was that, no, if he were looking for evil, he would have stayed at the Barclay Hotel because there were actually 2 serial killers that committed murders
There.
in that building.
Well, and so many people out there, like, he murdered there. No, he didn't murder at the Cecil Hotel.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think that, and that's how stories get started. I think is one little minor twist like that, and
Yeah.
here goes another story,
Yeah.
and then it just gets embellished, and then
Yeah,
here we
the
go.
Black Dahlia, a lot of businesses and places try to lay claim to the Black Dahlia was last seen. I once made a joke just about a month ago that I should do a tour, like, of last places that the Black Dahlia was seen. There'd be about 8 or 9
8 or
locations,
9, yeah,
right? And then actually end up in the tour at the one place that she was
last seen.
which was alive, which was the Biltmore
Right.
Hotel.
Exactly, the Biltmore Hotel, and you don't really hear. I feel like I hear more about the Cecil when I hear stuff about her than I do the Biltmore.
Yeah.
And
It's sad. Well, what happened, if you want to know the historical background behind that urban legend, I can go through it rather quickly. When Elizabeth Short disappeared and was found murdered, they were looking into all leads.
mm-hmm.
And there was a female police officer that claimed that outside of the Cecil Hotel, someone fitting her description came running out of a bar saying that she was trying to get away from some guys, some sailors or
Oh,
whatnot.
interesting. Okay.
So the female police officer, signed an affidavit to that, and then police went into one of the bars near there, and they interviewed a bartender who said, well, she could have been here, but
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
So then they started piecing it all together and
Right.
found out that they dismissed completely the female officer's claim because they actually found that she had been in San Diego
Oh, interesting.
at the time that this female police officer had claimed that they had seen her around a bar. So that was
There you go.
completely thrown out. Okay. So, and that's what a lot of people don't realize is that she had just arrived from San Diego and was dropped off at the Biltmore.
Wow.
where she had been for several days. So then we fast forward to, I want to say 1981 or so. There was a very popular book that was sold on Hollywood Boulevard for tourists called This is Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot who that writer was. I don't even know if he's still alive or not. But he was interviewed by a Los Angeles Times columnist. And they printed what he said,
Mm-hmm.
the columnist. And he said, oh, yeah, Elizabeth Short was last seen at the Cecil days before she was found dead or something, and that she frequented drinking in the bars.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she was not in L.A. A few
days before she was in
the
San
whole
Diego.
timeline that this guy spewed out is
Was wrong.
100% inaccurate.
Interesting.
So he had to throw that out. Now, this person that resurrected this urban legend went through the LA files, and she must have found this columnist thing from like 1980 or so,
oh, okay.
and saw that and put it in
Interesting.
without digging any deeper.
deeper.
Right, right.
Yes.
And then it went viral once it, because it's KCET, people assumed that it's correct.
Credible, yeah.
So then Travel Channel, I believe it was Travel Channel, they did a they did the first shock doc on the Cecil, and they brought in this writer
Oh, okay.
who's now an authority on
Right.
the Cecil, and she repeats it.
There you go.
And once it goes as a shock doc,
Right.
that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's over.
That's it.
Yeah.
Game over. Everyone now believes that it really happened. And it didn't. And, you know, I've noticed that Ghost Adventures, they repeat that. Everyone should know better.
Yeah.
By this time, everyone should know better.
yeah.
But they still love to do it. And the reason why they're doing it is because, you know, Eliza Lamb was a single woman, attractive, died under mysterious
Yeah.
circumstances, even though it's not so mysterious
No.
anymore.
Yes.
Whereas
No.
the Black Dahlia is still very much
Right,
a
right.
mystery. So it was just a way
Just
to
hang on to that.
to cash in on that,
Yeah.
to just make the Cecil more evil than it really
Then
is,
it really is, yeah.
or more devilish than it really is. And I actually, when places like the Cecil, and some to the degree the Aztec is, which is probably why the ghosts like me here, and the Alexandria Hotel, which is more haunted than the Cecil,
Right.
Wow.
I start really feeling sorry for the ghosts
Yeah.
after a while. I mean,
Yeah,
I
they
really
get a bad
start
rap.
feeling sorry for them because of the Queen Mary. Everyone's making up all kinds of stupid stuff,
Yeah.
about the ghost there.
Yeah.
Murders, taking place on the Queen Mary that never happened.
Never
And-
happened.
And you get a sense. When I was doing my book, I actually had some colorful characters help me with the proofreading.
Mm-hmm.
And I got this email from one of the proofreaders, and she said, "I think your book's haunted."
Oh.
and I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And she said, "What you're doing is really good because in a lot of places, I'm getting the feeling that the ghosts really want to be heard, but too many people are not listening, and they're
Yes.
just going with."
Yeah, these made up stories.
And she specifically talked about the Queen Mary, which should come out in volume 2, but isn't in volume 1. But, and what she had to say about the Aztec ghosts is like, you need to tell those ghosts that this place needs to be open. It seems like they're doing everything they can to keep it closed. And don't they know that if it stays closed too long, it will eventually get torn down?
Yes.
And so I said, okay, I'll tell the ghosts. Thank you.
Well, I want to so this is Craig's book.
Yeah.
Haunted by History, Volume 1. A wonderful book.
7 years of historical research.
And so
on
the-
16 hotels.
The
Wow.
hotels that he touches on here is the Hotel del Coronado, which is in
San Diego.
near San Diego area,
Yeah.
right? Victorian Rose Bed and Breakfast, which is where?
Ventura.
Okay. The Julian Gold Rush Hotel, which is in Julian, I'm assuming.
Right. San Diego County.
Mission Inn Hotel and Spa.
Riverside.
I've stayed there.
Love that place.
It's beautiful. Never had
The
an experience.
Alexandria.
Downtown LA.
The Wyndham Garden Ventura Pierpont Inn. Oh, I thought you were tapping my shoulder. The Banning House Lodge.
Catalina Island.
Oof. And the Glen Tavern Inn, which is Santa Paula, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I did it in the order in which the buildings were built.
Oh, okay.
That's why it starts with the Dell in 1888 and ends with the Glen Tavern in 1911. And then Volume 2 supposed to take up, later.
So
that's why the Aztec didn't make Volume 1. 'Cause
how
it's
far are
20s.
you on Volume 2?
Oh, I'm about 90% done with the research.
Okay, so you
I've done
you
photo
already
shoots of
know
all of
like
them.
what
Yeah.
you're touching on, what hotels you're.
Yeah. I still am looking into other buildings. I mean, so many people have asked me about the Cecil. I actually considered the Cecil.
I
for
actually asked you
Haunted by
the first
History.
time that I met you.
Yeah.
And because I've just always had an obsession with the Cecil for some reason.
Uh-huh.
And I asked you, and your response to me was, there's just bigger and better things out there than the Cecil. That was your response.
Yeah, that hasn't changed that much.
Yeah.
There were some reasons why I didn't do it, and one of the reasons was because it's Skid Row.
Right.
The management, even then, before Lisa Lamb, I was actually looking into it before Lisa Lamb and after Lisa Lamb, and it really made no much difference. They were kind of murky about whether they wanted to talk about the ghosts.
Yeah, of course.
The rooms were badly furnished with like plastic furniture,
Yeah.
and the elevators weren't working all that great.
Which I just want to touch on that real quick. That ugly plastic furniture. I have the chair from her room at my house. But the elevator situation, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because in Ghost Adventures, when they did this whole episode on the Cecil,
Yeah.
they spoke a lot about, and of course they're going to focus on the elevator, because of course we've all seen the Elisa Lam elevator, very disturbing video, but they touch on, oh my God, it goes by itself and you don't have to push the button and blah, 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 blah. The elevator at the Cecil is broken, and I stayed the night there, and that elevator goes up and down by itself all night long.
Yeah.
And it bangs like every minute on the minute. Like you hear it all night long. And so I just...
And there's another reason why I didn't want to include it is when I do, I guess I should back up and say what I do when I do things is I'm a photographer. I'll rent the haunted rooms, haunted spaces. I will actually bring people dressed in vintage clothing based on the history, or sometimes if I hear a ghost story, I'll recreate the ghost story in that room to see if it stirs things up. It's called the theory of familiarity. And I used very minimal lighting. Everything's minimal. I don't want a lot of people making a lot of noise. I don't want other residents to know even what I'm doing. Management has to know, but no one else really does. Yeah. So and it has to be slow times of the week in a largely unoccupied building. And I guarantee you, if you stay in these spaces for 4 or 5 days doing this, 17, 18 hours a day, you have a pretty good idea whether or not there's any merit to the ghost stories or not.
Of course.
What scared me off about the Cecil is that the noise factor makes it almost impossible to do a
It's very loud.
legit paranormal investigation.
Well, not only that, but then let's bring it back to it being on Skid Row.
Yeah.
There's sirens 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Like, they're just, that's all you hear going up and down Main Street are sirens. So,
And that's why Ghost Adventures used bad equipment that produced false positives.
yeah.
You didn't see them do one single legitimate ghost hunting technique there. They were using ovuluses, which were just random word generators. They were using ghost boxes, which are notorious for producing false positives, and then those mapping cameras. Give me a break. Those
Yeah,
things,
I mean,
things are
I don't-
highly manipulated.
I don't
too.
know. I'm not well versed on any of the equipment used.
Yeah, none
to
of that
do
stuff
any
I
of
would
that.
ever consider using as serious paranormal investigating stuff. It's cool. I mean, I got into it. I thought it was interesting the first few times that I saw it,
Mm-hmm.
saw it work. But mapping cameras, those like Game Boy cameras, and just go on YouTube and you'll find all these people finding ghosts in their living room in like their brand new home, and and the ghost, it looks for any kind of movement and just kind of guesses what these little
What it
stick
might be.
figures will
Yeah.
be, and you can make them appear by just doing just weird stuff,
Yeah.
by the way you even hold it.
Right.
And these guys know that.
Yeah.
And that's why they were struggling with the noise problem there. They couldn't do a real
Yeah.
investigation.
Yeah.
They get the chance of
And
a
it's
lifetime
it
to
is
do that.
it is loud there.
And
It
so
is very
they
loud.
resorted on equipment that produced false positives. They can't go back to travel and say we didn't catch anything.
Of course.
They'd be canceled. So
Yeah.
they have to come up with lots and lots
Yeah.
to live up to the hype.
Yeah. I mean,
So
and
they dragged in everybody. They dragged in unreliable sources,
yeah.
non-historians posing as historians. They people that really didn't know. But these people, some of them are good. Some I even know. Okay, but they're looking for people that will say what they want.
What they want them to say, of course.
and that's what they did.
Of course. It's all a script.
Right. And this is why they avoid me.
Well, because they feel like that's,
historian,
that's
then-
what people want. They
Yeah.
want that,
Well, I wouldn't do Ghost Adventures. I'll just be honest. That's one of the shows that I've said no to before, and I just won't do it.
I mean, yeah.
Well, I'm going to say that I'm really, really excited to take a tour of this
Yeah.
after. And that I just can't wait to look around and see the rooms that you're talking about, because I know Gina's been here before.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get started. And so, I mean, I don't know. I want to thank you for being here.
So if you want to say any
Okay,
few closing
yeah.
words
Well,
that we can.
thank you for sitting down and doing this with us. We appreciate this so much.
Well, thank you
I
for
could
having
I
me.
could talk
We
to you
should
for-
do it again.
Yes, I can
Yes,
listen
we
to you
will.
for hours. like,
Yes, we will
really.
do
We
this.
could do our top 10 urban legends.
Oh my
that we
God!
Yes.
Yes,
discuss.
yes,
Yes.
let's do it. Yes, we need to connect for sure.
That's
Yes,
awesome.
so please, Haunted by History, Volume 1, Craig Owens, Bizarre Los Angeles.
That's right.
Yep, it's-
Is
Yep.
Sorry,
Bizarre
keep
Los
going.
Angeles is your
Bizarre
Instagram.
Los Angeles. Yeah. And my Facebook page as
and
well.
and you need to check out his the photographs that he was talking about a few minutes ago. Definitely are amazing on
Well, thank you.
on
I've been
Instagram.
going back to that, and I'm going, I'm going to get this going again. My creative
It's
juices
wonderful.
are going.
No,
Yeah,
it's
I
wonderful.
love it.
So please check him out on Instagram, Facebook, and definitely purchase
Check
this
out his
baby.
book.
Yes,
Yes,
everything is.
Oh, that
is
will
on
certainly
his-
help speed volume 2
Yes,
a little bit
yes.
faster for
Please
sure.
speed
Yeah.
up volume 2.
Okay, so now we're gonna go take a tour
we'll have
of
those
this
videos
wonderful
up.
hotel, and we will have pictures and videos for you guys all. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
of course.
No, absolutely.
Okay.